Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back to Potomac Watch. I'm now joined by my colleague, Colin Levy, editorial board member, who's here to talk to us about a new school on civic life and leadership at the University of North Carolina. Hard to believe that it's already back to school season, but as kids head back to campus, we're going to talk about this new school of civic life and what it aims to teach. This fall, the school on UNC's campus will have a primer on the American political tradition, and students will study texts like the Federalist Papers, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and Aristotle. So I guess you're wondering, as much as I am, why is this even remotely controversial or newsworthy? So Colin, maybe you can fill us in on why setting up this school over the past year has been so controversial.
Right. Kate, I really think this is going to be a game changer. And it had a bit of a controversial beginning, mostly because the way it was created was that the Board of Trustees for the University of North Carolina came up with this idea that it could be a way to create an environment for free expression, for debate, and all these academic ideas that were at the time just being pushed back on by the cancel culture that we've sort of seen on campus. And they came up with this idea, and it went through before the faculty was sort of asked their opinion or permission about it. So that kicked up a big fuss on campus initially. I think in the months that have elapsed since, it's become very clear that the idea is just really perfect for our moment. I think it's incredibly good news that this is happening now, to be honest, because it's just what we need, Kate, heading into September as the college campuses are reopening and the students and faculty and administrators and the families, everyone's sort of on tenterhooks to see what things are going to look like on campus in terms of the protest environment. We saw so much really rancorous and unpleasant debate, not even debate, really just protests on campus last spring. So much anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment that metastasized across such a huge portion of the American higher education landscape. I think people took the summer to step back and say, well, that's really not what we want. That's not a positive contribution to the educational landscape. And we need to create some better ways for students to express their political views and debate with each other without it becoming this sprawling mess that's choreographed by outside groups. So I'm really glad to see that UNC has this starting now, and we can get into some of the details, I'm sure, moving forward.
Sure. For most of us who follow these trends for a living, it seems like higher ed has had some really acute problems for quite some time, whether it's great inflation or rising costs and decreasing outcomes, job outcomes, etc. But I really do think you're right that the protests this spring on campus and the college president's failure to defend what was going on at their schools in front of Congress definitely captured public attention in a new way. And so it is heartening to see some attempt to turn the temperature down and restore education to its proper sphere of trying to produce citizens who are prepared to live in a self-governing republic. I do have one other question for you on this front about the creation of it. About almost 10 years ago now, Mitch Daniels, who at the time was president of Purdue University and trying to get at so many problems in higher education, he told me in an interview, and I'll read a quick quote from it, that 15 years ago, corporate boards were criticized for being too compliant with the desires of management. And I think that's really been true a lot of college boards and trustees. They have an affection for dear old alma mater, love those 50-yard line seats, whatever you want to do, Mr. President. And I thought back to this point from Mitch Daniels in thinking about the new school at UNC, because it seems like there has been a trend of trustees not doing their job of overseeing colleges, improving their governance. So I'm curious if you see this as a really positive trend, as one more way to influence higher education, to have trustees that are willing to stand up to the faculty lounge and say, no, this is the direction we need to go, and play their real role, not just as donors to the school.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kate. I think they really did stand up for positive forward motion here at the University of North Carolina and improving the school's governance. And the school has now received solid support from the North Carolina General Assembly, which put about $4 million of funding into it. We're going to see that allocated over the next couple of fiscal years. And I think also so seeing the trustees, in this sort of upstander role should probably be inspiring also to those who are looking to see what things in higher education are worth spending private money on. There was enormous pressure, I think, last year, so much displeasure among donors at universities who really felt like the donations that they were giving at schools like Harvard and MIT and some of these institutions that had such outrageous incidents of anti-Semitism, all these donors said, hey, these schools that we love are no longer capable of articulating basic principles of protection for students. So I think the role of the trustees is really valuable in terms of leadership there. And I would say the faculty that UNC is bringing in is really impressive group of people who have long history of dedicating themselves to the core ideas of academic integrity and free expression. So they're going to be bringing in 11 new professors. Their new dean, whose name is Jed Atkins, is coming in from the Civil Discourse Project at Duke, where they did a lot of cool things, including setting up residential dorms where students could sit in around the common room at night and say, let's watch the DNC, and then actually talk to each other about it.
Novel thought.
A groundbreaking thing, right? I mean, that's exactly it, Kate. I mean, that's where we are now. I think there's such an instinct among people, especially on college campuses, that we've all become so afraid to be able to debate difficult subjects, and relearning that skill and being able to engage. These are the smartest young people in the country at these schools. They're the future of our country, not to be hokey, but they are. And, these are critical skills that they're focusing on here now at UNC.
Yeah. And as you look across higher ed reform, it seems to me there have been kind of two popular models among those who want to see a change in traditional higher ed, not in other spaces like apprentice programs or vocational schools, which are also, I think, an important part of the conversation. But the two models by which I mean you have building countercultural institutions, building your own new countercultural college that exists to function outside this space and teach some of these texts that you're describing, core texts to the Western tradition. But then you also have something like we're seeing like at UNC, also at the University of Florida, that Ben Sasse, the president, recently stepped down for president reasons, but he had been setting up some institutions at the University of Florida and hiring faculty for them, working within existing institutions, working within existing colleges. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this is going to work at UNC, and how are they going to try to take a cohort of kids and influence them through a few classes? What kind of model here might be exportable to other schools and other large existing colleges who want to do this?
Right. So it's going to exist within the University of North Carolina regular system. This fall, they're offering 3 classes. It's going to be sort of a warm-up for the program, and it's a neat way that they're doing it. They're going to be offering basically foundations courses, one of which is going to, as you mentioned before, explore some of these major ideas in American political thought and history. And then they're also going to be offering a course that really focuses on the foundations of debate. So the way that this is going to blend in with other history courses within the school, I think, is actually very complementary. They're going to be spreading out into ideas like, what is the role of science in policy? What is the university for? Does history have a direction? What's the best political and economic order for human flourishing? They have plans to look at the politics of the Bible. They're even looking at doing a class on C.S. Lewis and a Disenchanted World. So there's so much under this umbrella of civic life and leadership. And the key thing here is that I think when you begin with creating a free speech environment, there's so much ability to move beyond the academic binaries and move across departments within the humanities.
Well, thanks, Colin. Perhaps one of the most hopeful things we've discussed on this podcast in some time. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow with more Potomac Watch.